Have you ever wondered what Seventh-day Adventists are actually hiding? What if everything you thought you knew about this global religious movement was just the surface? I spent months researching their hidden practices, controversial origins, and the shocking truth about what they really believe. By the end of this video, you'll understand why millions of followers remain dedicated despite mounting controversies, and I'll share one revelation that completely changed how I view organized religion altogether. This isn't just another religious breakdown. This is the truth they don't want exposed. Unknown origins. The Seventh-day Adventist Church presents itself as a straightforward Christian denomination that worships on Saturday instead of Sunday. But there's a much deeper story here that most people, even many Adventists themselves, don't fully understand. The movement began not with divine inspiration, but with one of the most devastating disappointments in American religious history. In the 1840s, a Baptist preacher named William Miller convinced thousands of people that Christ would return on October 22, 1844. People sold their homes, abandoned their fields, and gave away their possessions. When nothing happened, what became known as the Great Disappointment, most followers scattered, crushed by the weight of their misplaced faith. But instead of admitting the prediction was wrong, a small group reinterpreted the prophecy. They claimed something invisible had happened in the heavens that day, that Christ had entered the heavenly sanctuary to begin an investigative judgment of humanity. These theological gymnastics became the foundation of Seventh-day Adventism. What's fascinating is how rarely this origin story is discussed in depth, even within Adventist circles. The church emphasizes its current doctrines but often glosses over the crisis of faith that birthed it. This pattern of reinterpreting failed prophecies rather than acknowledging mistakes has characterized certain elements of the movement throughout its history. The early Adventists weren't just disappointed followers looking for meaning, they were radical religious outsiders, challenging nearly every aspect of mainstream Christianity. Early Adventists believed other churches were fallen Babylon, corrupted beyond redemption. This was not a minor theological disagreement, but a fundamental rejection of established religious authority. Understanding this tumultuous beginning is crucial because it shaped the movement's identity as separate, distinct, and possessing special truth others lacked. This sense of exceptionalism continues today in subtle ways, influencing how Adventists interact with the broader world and other faith traditions. Prophet questions. Ellen G. White stands as one of the most influential religious figures in American history that most people have never heard of. Adventists consider her a prophet with divine revelations, though this aspect of their faith is often downplayed in public evangelism. What's rarely discussed is the extraordinary extent of her influence on every aspect of Adventist doctrine, practice, and daily life. White produced over 100,000 pages of written material, an output so vast it would be physically impossible for one person to produce without modern technology. This has led to serious questions about the originality of her work. Research has uncovered extensive similarities between her writings and earlier published works, raising uncomfortable questions about the divine origin of her visions. More striking is the almost unquestioning authority her writings still hold within conservative Adventist circles. While the official church position describes her work as a continuing and authoritative source of truth, in practice, her words often carry weight equal to or greater than Scripture itself. Sermons are filled with her quotes, and in theological disputes, her writings frequently serve as the final word. What many people don't realize is how White's visions extended beyond theology into nearly every aspect of daily life. She provided detailed instruction on diet, clothing, entertainment, marriage, child-rearing, education, and medical treatment. Some of her health guidance was revolutionary for its time, promoting vegetarianism and abstinence from tobacco. Other directives now seem arbitrary or scientifically questionable, like her strong opposition to certain food combinations or specific medical treatments. The psychological impact of viewing these highly specific lifestyle guidelines as divinely inspired cannot be overstated. For many Adventists, everyday decisions become spiritualized. Eating cheese or drinking coffee isn't just unhealthy, it potentially represents rebellion against God's revealed will through his prophet. What's particularly complex about White's prophetic role is how it creates a tension within Adventism's proclaimed principle of the Bible alone. While officially subordinating her writings to Scripture, in practice, her interpretations so thoroughly shape how Adventists read the Bible that the two become almost inseparable. This interweaving of biblical text with White's commentary has created a distinct interpretive world that can make meaningful theological dialogue with other Christians challenging. Health paradox. Seventh-day Adventists are known for living longer, healthier lives. Studies consistently show they outlive the general population by years, a fact the church rightfully celebrates. But here's what's rarely discussed. Beneath this impressive health legacy lies a complex and sometimes troubling relationship with medicine, science, and the human body. Adventism's health message began with Ellen White's visions advocating vegetarianism, abstinence from alcohol and tobacco, regular exercise, and adequate rest, revolutionary concepts in the 1860s. These principles predated modern nutritional science by decades and have been vindicated by contemporary research. The church established a vast network of hospitals, medical schools, and wellness centers globally, genuinely improving countless lives. But there's another side to this story. The same prophetic authority that promoted these beneficial practices also endorsed now discredited treatments like hydrotherapy as cures for serious diseases and sometimes portrayed illness as a spiritual failing rather than a medical condition. Some of White's more extreme health views, like her warnings against sexual activity depleting vital life force or certain food combinations poisoning the blood, reflected 19th century pseudoscientific theories rather than divine revelation. This creates a profound tension within Adventist health culture. The denomination simultaneously embraces modern medical science through its healthcare institutions while maintaining reverence for health guidance rooted in visions and 19th century health reform movements. For individual believers, this can create genuine confusion about whether faith or science should guide their health decisions in cases where the two appear to conflict. More troubling is how this health message sometimes transforms from beneficial guidance into a marker of spiritual worthiness. In some Adventist communities, dietary choices become moralized, those who follow the strictest interpretation of the health message viewing themselves as spiritually superior to those who don't. What began as guidance for well-being becomes a system of judgment and spiritual hierarchy. The most problematic element emerges when health becomes connected to salvation. While not official teaching, the subtle implication in some circles is that proper health practices are necessary for spiritual clarity and, ultimately, salvation itself. This creates a performance-based religious experience where one's standing before God becomes tied to whether they eat cheese or drink coffee. Paradoxically, this focus on physical health sometimes comes at the expense of mental and emotional well-being. The pressure to maintain perfect health habits has led many Adventists to develop anxiety, guilt, and shame around food and body, creating a different kind of health crisis altogether. Saturday significance. At the core of Seventh-day Adventist identity is their observance of Saturday as the Sabbath, a practice they believe connects them directly to God's original design and distinguishes them from other Christians. But what most people don't understand is how profoundly this single practice shapes their entire worldview and their understanding of both history and the future. Adventists don't just see Sabbath keeping as a beneficial spiritual practice. They view it as the ultimate test of loyalty to God that will eventually divide humanity. According to traditional Adventist eschatology, Sunday worship will eventually be legally enforced worldwide, and those who continue keeping the Saturday Sabbath will face persecution, economic boycott, and potentially death penalties. This perspective transforms a day of worship into the central battleground of cosmic history. What's rarely acknowledged is how this narrative has created complex psychological effects within the community. On one hand, it fosters a powerful sense of purpose and identity. Sabbath keepers see themselves as God's final faithful remnant, standing for truth against overwhelming opposition. On the other hand, it can generate suspicion toward other Christians and government institutions, perceived as potential agents in this coming persecution. The historical justification for this emphasis on Saturday worship involves extensive critique of early Christianity, particularly the role of the Roman Emperor Constantine in allegedly changing the Sabbath from Saturday to Sunday. Adventists have invested enormous theological energy in documenting this historical transition, often portraying it as the greatest deception in Christian history. This narrative frames other Christians not simply as people with different practices, but as unwitting participants in a cosmic rebellion against God's law. What's most striking is how this single doctrinal point extends beyond personal religious practice into a comprehensive worldview that interprets past, present, and future events. Current events involving religious liberty, Sunday closing laws, or ecumenical movements between Catholics and Protestants are frequently analyzed through this lens, seen as potential signs of the coming crisis over Sabbath observance. For individual Adventists, weekly Sabbath keeping serves as both spiritual nourishment and identity marker, a regular reminder of their distinct calling and perspective. The day typically involves church attendance, nature activities, fellowship meals, and abstention from secular work and entertainment. In its best expression, it creates a beautiful rhythm of rest and spiritual renewal. Yet it can also generate legalistic debates about what activities are appropriate for Sabbath hours. Educational empire. Most people have no idea that Seventh-day Adventists operate one of the largest private educational systems in the world, second only to the Catholic Church. With over 9,000 schools, colleges, and universities serving nearly 2 million students globally, their educational footprint is vast, yet largely invisible to the public. Unlike many religious education systems that focus primarily on theological training, Adventist education spans from kindergarten through medical school, offering everything from liberal arts degrees to healthcare training. Their medical school, Loma Linda University, has pioneered transplant surgery and proton therapy cancer treatments. This comprehensive approach reflects something profound about Adventist identity: the belief that education is not just about information, but total transformation of the person. What's less understood is how this educational system serves as the primary mechanism for transmitting Adventist culture, worldview, and identity to the next generation. These aren't simply schools that add prayer to secular curriculum. They integrate distinctive Adventist perspectives into every subject. Science classes approach evolution differently. History courses emphasize religious liberty and prophecy fulfillment. And even mathematics and literature are taught within a framework that reinforces Adventist values. The psychological impact of this educational immersion cannot be overstated. For students who progress through the entire system, from elementary school through university, it creates a comprehensive worldview where Adventist interpretations of reality seem natural and unquestionable. This educational approach has proven remarkably effective at retaining young people within the faith tradition. Though critics question whether it adequately prepares students to engage with competing worldviews they'll encounter beyond the Adventist environment. Paradoxically, while these institutions were established partly to protect Adventist youth from worldly influences, they have also become powerful vehicles for change within Adventism itself. University campuses often become spaces where traditional interpretations are questioned, where young Adventists encounter more progressive theological perspectives, and where the boundaries between Adventist identity and broader culture are renegotiated. This creates tension within the denomination about the true purpose of Adventist education. Should these institutions primarily preserve distinctive Adventist identity, or should they prepare students to engage with the wider world? Should they prioritize doctrinal purity or academic excellence and critical thinking? The answer varies dramatically between conservative and progressive Adventist educational institutions. What's particularly interesting is how this educational system functions as both boundary marker and bridge. On one hand, it clearly separates Adventists from mainstream society, creating a parallel social world with its own norms and values. On the other hand, these institutions, particularly the medical schools and hospitals, represent Adventism's most significant point of positive contact with the broader culture, earning respect even from those who disagree with the theological foundations. Cultural divisions. Behind the unified front Seventh-day Adventism presents to the world lies a deeply divided community wrestling with its identity in the modern world. What outsiders rarely see are the profound theological, cultural, and philosophical divides that have intensified in recent decades, threatening the cohesion of this global movement. The most visible divide centers on women's ordination, whether women can serve as pastors with the same authority as men. This issue has revealed deeper fault lines between progressive and traditional factions within the Church. North American, European, and Australian Adventism generally support women's ordination, while African, South American, and much of Asian Adventism strongly oppose it. These positions reflect not just different biblical interpretations, but fundamentally different approaches to cultural adaptation, biblical authority, and church governance. What makes these divisions particularly painful is how they play out against Adventism's historical self-understanding as God's remnant church, a unified movement carrying forward divine truth in the last days of Earth's history. The reality of deep, potentially irreconcilable disagreements challenges this narrative of exceptional unity and divine guidance. Beyond theological concerns, Adventism is experiencing the challenge of maintaining a distinctive subculture in an increasingly interconnected world. Traditional boundary markers that separated Adventists from the world, distinctive diet, entertainment choices, dress standards, and social practices have eroded as younger generations question whether these practices are truly biblical requirements or merely cultural traditions. Another rarely discussed tension exists between the denomination's apocalyptic roots and its current institutional success. Early Adventists expected the imminent return of Christ and the end of the world, a belief that still forms the theological core of Adventism, even embedded in the name Adventist. Yet the movement has simultaneously built massive institutions, hospitals, universities, publishing houses, and administrative structures that implicitly plan for long-term future existence. This creates a cognitive dissonance where the stated belief system is oriented toward an imminent end, while the institutional behavior suggests preparation for extended earthly continuance. What's particularly fascinating is how different segments of Adventism resolve this tension. Some maintain high apocalyptic expectation and view institutional growth primarily as advancing the final message before Christ's return. Others have effectively de-emphasized apocalypticism, focusing instead on building sustainable institutions that embody Adventist values for the indefinite future. These divisions have created distinct experiences of Adventism that sometimes bear little resemblance to each other. A progressive Adventist attending a university church in California might hardly recognize their faith as practiced in a traditional rural congregation in Tennessee or Kenya. This spectrum of experience ranges from communities still practicing the most conservative interpretations of Ellen White's counsels to congregations nearly indistinguishable from mainstream evangelical churches except for their Saturday worship. Global influence. Few people realize the extraordinary global reach and influence of Seventh-day Adventism, a movement that has transformed from an American apocalyptic sect into a worldwide phenomenon with disproportionate cultural impact relative to its size. With approximately 22 million baptized members, Adventists have established presence in nearly every country on earth, making them arguably one of the most successful American religious exports ever. What's remarkable isn't just the geographic spread, but the movement's success in culturally translating its message across radically different contexts. Unlike some American religious exports that remain culturally American overseas, Adventism has effectively indigenized, becoming authentically African, Asian, South American, and Pacific Islander in those contexts. In many countries of the global south, Adventism is experienced not as a foreign import, but as an authentic expression of local Christianity. This globalization has fundamentally altered the center of gravity within Adventism. While the administrative headquarters remain in the United States, the demographic heart has shifted decisively to the global south. Countries like Brazil, Peru, Kenya, Rwanda, and the Philippines now represent the movement's most dynamic growth centers. This shift creates both opportunity and tension as these regions increasingly assert their influence over a denomination historically dominated by American leadership and theological frameworks. What's rarely discussed is how thoroughly Adventism has penetrated certain regions. In some Pacific Island nations, Adventists represent over 10% of the population. In parts of Latin America and Africa, their influence extends far beyond membership numbers through their educational and healthcare institutions. In Rwanda, for example, Adventist leadership played significant roles both in the tragic genocide and in subsequent reconciliation efforts, reflecting the movement's deep cultural embeddedness. Adventism's humanitarian footprint is similarly oversized. The Adventist Development and Relief Agency, ADRA, operates in over 130 countries with an annual budget exceeding $300 million, partnering with governments and international organizations on development projects, disaster response, and refugee assistance. This humanitarian work often reaches places where other organizations struggle to gain access, leveraging the church's local presence and cultural knowledge. Perhaps most significant is Adventism's influence on global health culture. The denomination's emphasis on preventive medicine, vegetarianism, and lifestyle medicine has extended far beyond its membership. Adventist health principles have influenced public health policies in numerous countries. Their Loma Linda community in California is one of the world's 5 recognized blue zones, where people live measurably longer, healthier lives, making it the subject of National Geographic features and scientific research. This global reach creates complex dynamics within the movement itself. As Adventism has become truly global, tensions have emerged between maintaining worldwide doctrinal unity and allowing for cultural contextualization. Questions about what constitutes core Adventist identity versus adaptable cultural expression generate ongoing negotiation between the Church's American Administrative Center and its increasingly assertive global membership. Final revelation. After months of researching Seventh-day Adventism, interviewing current and former members, and examining both critical and supportive perspectives, I've come to a revelation that transcends the specific facts about this religious movement. What I've discovered speaks to something much deeper about faith, community, and the human search for meaning. The most profound truth about Seventh-day Adventism isn't about its doctrines, practices, or controversies. It's about how this movement illustrates humanity's fundamental need for purpose, identity, and cosmic significance. Adventism provides its adherents with a comprehensive narrative that explains history, gives meaning to the present, and offers hope for the future. It situates individual lives within a grand cosmic drama where everyday choices matter eternally. This is the real power behind Adventism's continued growth despite prophecy adjustments, controversies, and cultural challenges. In a world increasingly characterized by fragmentation, uncertainty, and spiritual rootlessness, Adventism offers something modern secular society struggles to provide: a coherent worldview with clear moral boundaries, meaningful community, and the sense that one's life is part of something transcendent. The most successful religious movements aren't necessarily those with the most rational theology or the fewest contradictions. They're the ones that most effectively address fundamental human needs for belonging, meaning, and purpose. Adventism, with its strong community structures, distinctive lifestyle practices, and comprehensive cosmic narrative, meets these needs for millions of people across extraordinarily diverse cultural contexts. What's most striking is the lived reality of Adventism for its most dedicated adherents. Despite the movement's flaws and contradictions, which exist in every human institution, millions of Adventists experience their faith not as restrictive or fear-based, but as genuinely life-giving. The Sabbath becomes not just a doctrinal distinctive, but a psychological sanctuary from the relentless demands of modern life. Dietary practices become not just rules, but tangible connections to a community and its values. Apocalyptic beliefs provide not just fear, but also hope that current injustices and suffering aren't the final word on human existence. This doesn't mean we should avoid critical examination of Adventist history, prophecy interpretations, or institutional practices. Quite the opposite. Honest evaluation serves both truth and the community itself. But it does mean we should approach this and all religious movements with the humility to recognize that from the inside, these faiths often provide meaning, purpose, and community that transcend their theological peculiarities. The ultimate question isn't whether Adventism gets every doctrine right according to some objective standard. The deeper question is how this movement, like all enduring religious traditions, continues to create meaning, community, and moral purpose for millions of people in a world that increasingly struggles to provide these essentials of human flourishing. Whatever your own spiritual journey, whether you're Adventist, another faith tradition, or no religious affiliation at all, this understanding invites a more compassionate, nuanced engagement with those whose beliefs differ from yours. Beyond the doctrinal debates lies the shared human search for meaning and connection, a quest that unites us even when our answers diverge. This is what I hope you take from this exploration, not just facts about a particular religious movement, but a deeper appreciation for the profound human needs that all enduring spiritual traditions address. In understanding this, we move beyond mere critique or defense of specific beliefs toward a more profound recognition of our shared humanity and spiritual longing.